How I Outsmarted My Cheating Wife. For 30 years, Robert thought his wife, Linda, was his soulmate. They had weathered life's storms together, raising 2 children, navigating careers, and enjoying the quiet joys of retirement. But recently, Linda had grown distant. She spent more time on her phone, laughing softly at messages and staying out later than usual. At first, Robert dismissed it as his imagination. Perhaps she had found a new hobby or rekindled an old friendship. But as weeks turned into months, a knot of suspicion grew in his gut. It started innocently enough. Linda mentioned she had joined a book club to keep her mind sharp. Robert thought it was a lovely idea. She had always been an avid reader, often losing herself in novels for hours. But when he asked about the books they were discussing, her answers were vague. She couldn't name a single title or author. "Oh, it's just light stuff," she'd say with a dismissive wave of her hand. Something about her tone felt rehearsed, like she had prepared her responses in advance. One evening, Linda came home wearing a smile that didn't seem meant for him. She also carried a faint scent of expensive cologne, not her own and certainly not his. That night, as she showered, Robert sat alone in the living room, grappling with his doubts. His heart ached, but he resolved to uncover the truth. Robert confided in his old friend Tom, a retired police officer. Tom had always been pragmatic and unflinching. Over coffee, Robert poured out his suspicions. Tom listened quietly, then leaned back in his chair and said, "If you're ready for the truth, I'll help you." The first step was gathering evidence. Tom installed monitoring software on their home Wi-Fi, which allowed Robert to see the activity on Linda's devices. Within days, Robert's worst fears were confirmed. Linda had been exchanging messages with someone named Daniel. The texts were intimate and filled with inside jokes. She called him Dan and signed off with affectionate emojis. One message read, "Can't wait to see you again, sweetheart." It was like a knife to Robert's chest. Despite the overwhelming hurt, Robert decided not to confront Linda immediately. He needed undeniable proof, something she couldn't dismiss or explain away. He wanted her to understand the depth of her betrayal. Tom suggested creating a controlled environment where Linda's actions could be documented. Together, they devised a plan. Robert rented a small apartment downtown and set it up with discreet cameras. To lure Linda into the trap, they created a fake social media profile. James, a well-traveled widower who shared her love of literature. Tom's background in surveillance made the profile believable, complete with photos, hobbies, and a backstory. Robert felt a pang of guilt as he sent the first message. Pretending to be someone else felt dishonest, but his resolve was stronger. Linda responded within hours. Their conversation began casually but quickly grew personal. She opened up to James, sharing that she felt unappreciated in her marriage. "Sometimes I wonder if this is all there is," she wrote. Reading those words crushed Robert. How could she feel neglected when he had spent his life trying to make her happy? But he pressed on, determined to see it through. After weeks of messages, James suggested meeting in person. Linda agreed without hesitation. On the day of the meeting, Robert prepared the apartment. Cameras were hidden in strategic spots to capture every moment. Tom monitored the feed from his laptop, ready to provide support if needed. Robert told Linda he had a doctor's appointment that afternoon and wouldn't be home until evening. She seemed relieved as she left the house dressed elegantly, her usual casual demeanor replaced by a nervous excitement. Robert arrived at the apartment before Linda and waited in the shadows. When she entered, she called out, "James." Her voice was warm, almost eager. Robert stepped forward, and the look on her face froze him. Shock, guilt, and fear flashed across her features. "Robert, what are you doing here?" she stammered. He held up his phone, displaying the messages she had exchanged with both James and Daniel. Her shoulders sagged as realization dawned. "It's not what it looks like," she began, but her voice faltered. "Do you love him?" Robert's voice was steady, but barely above a whisper. The silence that followed was deafening. Her hesitation was all the answer he needed. The confrontation that followed was explosive. Linda begged for forgiveness, insisting it had been a moment of weakness. She blamed loneliness, claiming she had felt invisible in their marriage. But Robert couldn't reconcile her excuses with the betrayal he had uncovered. The divorce was messy. Linda tried to frame herself as the victim, but the evidence Robert presented, the messages, the recordings, painted a different picture. Their children were devastated but supportive, rallying around Robert as he pieced his life back together. In the months that followed, Robert reflected on the life he had built with Linda and the cracks that had gone unnoticed. Therapy helped him process the pain and rebuild his sense of self-worth. He took up hobbies he had neglected over the years, gardening, woodworking, and even joining a local book club, where he found genuine companionship. Looking back, Robert didn't regret setting the trap. The truth, though painful, had set him free. He had loved Linda deeply, but her betrayal had shown him the importance of honesty and respect in a relationship. As he moved forward, he carried those lessons with him, determined to live authentically and fully.